We're off to our next presentation. As Mike has already shared it, Brexit and the UKCA. Mike Violette, I think everybody probably knows Mike, but Mike is the CEO of Washington Labs, director of the ACB. He's he has worked in China, Taiwan, and the EU, and has developed organizations that support the global testing industry. Mike, I guess without further ado, we'll turn things over to you, and we look forward to your presentation. Thanks for joining us today.
Great, good, thanks. Can you hear me okay? And is this screen showing?
Yep, we're good. Okay. Good on both audio and video.
All right, good. So I'm in support of the UK, wearing me trusty bowler today, which my wife absolutely despises, but she's not here. So about me, I've been around a while. I'm a recovering EMC engineer, and we get to do lots of cool projects with people. Two companies, Washington Labs, who've been around for 30 plus years, been ACIL member for much of that, recruited back in the early 90s at least. So lots of cool projects. We're a notified body with under the UKCA and the RED and the EMC directive. And then the other side of me is American Certification Body. You're probably aware of this other organization, which I'm pleased to help with. So we're in US, Beijing, EU, and Taiwan. And we're about 50 people all over the world. So this is kind of our combined staff right here. So I'm a lucky guy. Got a lot of great people working with us. I know Mr. Koster's on the line too. He's been with me for over 25 years and been on the board of directors of ACIL, so serving in that capacity. So anyway, Brexit, what happened? A little bit of background. Well, we can't really put the politics aside. So we're looking at, the transition period right now as the Brexit deals start to form some shape. And on the conformity assessment side, it's actually has been kind of resolved pretty well between the US and UK and the EU. But I kind of look a little bit historically, the UK and the EU, they were kind of a reluctant joiner. They were kind of one of the latecomers to the European Union process. They still use the pound. They never gave up the British pound. They're an island nation. And I think some historical context might be interesting because there's a lot that runs deeply through these, where we're at now in our path on conformity assessment. Doing some research, circa 1920, the British Empire had dominion over 24% of the world's population. You can see in red there the various nations which were part of the empire, and some of them continue to be part of the Commonwealth. Of course, they lost a big chunk of North America in 1776. The colonial shuffle, I call it, and it's interesting to see what happened some 20 or so years later as the colonial empires started to get dissolved. Roosevelt thought the World War II was a great time to break up the colonial systems, but some disagreed. In particular, Charles de Gaulle, who wanted to hold on to Vietnam. And if you looked at the history of our engagement there, it really begins with the French grab and try to reconsolidate the control of Vietnam. Many of you on the call know I've got a passion for that country, so it's interesting to see how things unwind. But anyway, the European Union was formed at the end of World War II when people stopped fighting each other over there largely. So 1957, the Treaty of Rome, the 60s, further cooperation, further turmoil. The 60s were a very effervescent decade. But the UK finally joined in EU in 1973. So was a long, successful cooperation, and various political things made it unwind in the mid 2010s. 1980 saw the fall of the USSR, more countries joining the EU either tacitly or directly. And for us in our business, the CE marking emerged in the 1990s as a way to reduce barriers and technical trade issues, as Jennifer was talking about, which is her forte and understanding. And it really, for the lab business and for our businesses, it really created an opportunity to help American manufacturers place products on the market. So it's been an overwhelming success. And notably on the radio side, which the radio equipment directive is an important part of our activities. So in the 2000s, Brexit was voted into action by the British people. So before 2020, before UK left, the European Union and its EEA countries constitute about 4.5 million people, which is a large market. And in the Europe, we have the various directives that affect notably electronic products, which is our métier, if you will. Self-declaration is allowed for many products, as long as you meet so-called essential requirements and use harmonized standards. So a lot of the language just transposed into the British regulations, the UK regulations. So the devil's in the details a little bit on some of the nuances between issuing certificates, which I'll address in a moment. And as we know, notified bodies are allowed for certain classes of equipment, particularly dangerous stuff, and where harmonized standards don't exist. This is a list of most of the directives that have been enacted. I think that's an up-to-date list. I try to make sure that it is. But the causes of Brexit ultimately came down to some exit polls where it said nearly half of the voters leaving said the biggest reason was the principles that decisions about UK should be taken by the UK. So it was a very, very slim margin, as elections seem to be these years. So the referendum won by a vote of 51.8%. And the main causes cited were sovereignty, immigration, and the economy. So the exit from the UK shakes many foundations, and the CE mark process affects all kinds of trade, electronics, medical devices, construction. And as I mentioned before, the directives are intended to break down trade barriers. So in observing what's going on with the Brexit, and Ramona, you probably have better insight than I, as far as making the transition as smooth as possible. I think the idea is to make sure there's kind of a soft landing for manufacturers and not try to make it too complicated in terms of redesigning, retesting. And so largely that appears to be the framework of what's occurring with the UK CA mark and what they call conformity assessed. So it's a United Kingdom conformity assessed. That's the direct term for it. And its critical sectors and technology include EMC, wireless, and that of course affects safety, health, entertainment, all kinds of things in our modern life. So the UK left in a year ago, January 2021, and the UK, the actual regulations are the UK regulations relating to EMC and radio have come into effect. So again, it's the United Kingdom conformity assessed mark, and it applies to Wales, England, and Scotland, basically Great Britain. So the UK CA marking applies to most goods previously subject to CE marking, transferring the same results over. The essential requirements are largely the same. Self-declaration is allowed, and it came into effect just at the beginning of this year. And there's a transition period where the CE is okay until 1 January 2022 in most cases. There's a few carve-outs for medical devices, which I'm not sure of the exact details, but someone in the industry lobbied successfully to keep the CE marking applicable for those. So for now, at least this year, if you've got a product on the EU and EEA or the UK market, you don't need to do anything this year. However, you will have to start labeling the device with a UK CA mark effective 1 January 2022. So the UK regulations for EMC and radio for January 1st, 2021, there are certificates which may apply for UK regulations during this period. Again, it depends on the type of device, whether a non-harmonized standard exists. And we have a number of clients that, particularly in Asia and China, that request certificates for their device, even though they're using harmonized standard. And largely, that's a market access issue for these companies, where they may use the type exam certificate either to boost the value of their product, frankly, or use it to enter other markets. So we're starting to see some interest in the UK CA mark. So fortunately, we've got our friends in the US government that early on worked out a mutual recognition arrangement with the UK. I believe Ramona touched on that earlier. So US notified bodies can act as UK notified bodies. presently, there's no MRA between the EU and UK. So from a frankly business point of view, it gives us a nice position because we can get market access activities for both EU and the UK as a US notified body recognized under both MRAs. As far as standards goes, the technical content of the standards are identical. The UK version will be prefixed by BS, a British standard for that. One of the important things for the CAS group is that we're going to have to start transitioning our test reports references to the new BS standards. So I know at Washington Labs, it's always a trick to make sure that we get the right standard version. So it's going to add some more verbiage to the standard test reports if somebody wants to access both the European Union and the UK. So when to use the UKCA marking? You only need to use the new marking before next January if all the following applies. If it covered by legislation which requires the UKCA marking, and I don't have intimate knowledge of that, but I imagine there's always some hooks there. If it requires a mandatory third-party conformity assessment, such as for non-harmonized standards. So right now we have a queue of those kinds of activities that we're working on the processes and procedures in order to support our customers that need to have these this third-party conformity assessment. So the CE is okay for existing stock until 1 January 2022, but it is a timing issue, and we're trying to inform our customers that they need to start looking at their labeling if they're specifically selling into the CE countries and the UKCA regimen. So clients hate changing labels, and it's getting crowded on some of these devices. And one of the things that's kind of weird about the European Union requirements is they don't allow e-labeling, which is allowed in North America, where if you have a device with a screen, you can put all the conformity assessment stuff on a menu tab somewhere inside the device. So after 1 January, the CE marking won't be recognized in Great Britain. However, as long as it's still on the market, you comply with the rules, you can leave the CE mark on there, but you will have to mark the thing with the UKCA mark. As I mentioned before, separate rules apply to medical devices, and for at least an unknown amount of time, some legacy CE marking is okay for medical devices. So labeling is kind of the usual stuff. You have to put it on the packaging, product or packaging, can be in the manual or other supporting literature. So there are always some details, specific details that you got to look at for this particular part of the product. And in the lab and at ACB, we always are looking at labels and making sure that the thing conforms properly. So must only be placed by the manufacturer or an authorized agent. And you take full responsibility for the conformity with the requirements. So another kind of common sense thing on labeling, part 2, you can't have a confused marking. That's kind of standard. Only use if you are allowed. Must use the correct proportion of UKCA. So there's a specific logo, and this is not unusual. This is similar with the CE marking. There's a prescribed shape and proportionality to the marking. It has a minimum height of 5 millimeters and has to be visible, legible, and from January 2023, it must be permanently attached. So again, it's a little bit of a transition. Perhaps you can get around with a label that you slip into a box until you get around to changing your permanent label. Similar to CE marking requirements, the technical documentation and the declaration of conformity has to meet the usual criteria with the name, model number, stated references, responsible party, etc. There's a link for more particulars for the documentation and the DOC. So issuing certificates. We see a lot of interest in issuing UK certificates. Again, I mentioned that our Chinese clients in particular have been a fan of notified body opinions in the past and type exam certificates. And they're using harmonized standards, but again, it's a market access thing. So we're starting to get pickup from that particular region on how to issue UKCA certificates. Now, in order to issue it, there's a particular phrase in the red guide, and so I'll just read it real quick. Where a notified body performs an examination of the technical documentation already from an already notified body, then we must accept the results of that examination without needing to repeat the assessment. So we are, this particular part of the red says we just have to kind of rubber stamp the thing. So my engineers, being engineers, however, are looking at this critically, because if we see something that has errors, how are we going to deal with that? And this issue in the red says that, well, we're not supposed to require a reassessment. However, we don't like to pass along errors. So one of the things we're trying to figure out, and maybe there's some nuances and interpretation, is to, what are we going to go back and critically examine if we find problems in earlier certificate or earlier documentation? What should we do? So we're trying to figure that out as we kind of online these projects.
It's not specific to UKCA. That could be any other country's notified body that you'd have an issue with, right? Correct.
So the mechanism here, Dan, would be if we're issuing a UKCA cert, we're trying to put this programmatically into it. But typically with the regular red certificates, I can't remember a time when we reissued a certificate from another notified body. So this is a specific case that kind of has crept up with this transition. So these are the things that we are requiring when submitting a UKCA reissue application form, a copy of a valid EU type examination certificate. So that's kind of where the rub is there, is that what makes it valid? What, in our opinion, or how do we substantiate it? I know we're going to want to have, all the DOC label, all the technical documentation, and then information on how the requirements of what's called Schedule 14 of the UK radio regulations have been met. So that's similar to requirements in Article 10.10 of red. So one thing that has come out of the discussion is representation. There's confusion over what the representation is. So currently in the EU, distributors are one class of agents or bodies, or what they call it, commercial interests, something, versus importers. So from January 1st, 2021, entities in the UK that function as distributors will automatically become importers. You don't have to appoint an authorized representative, but you may. And one of the quirks of our business, a little dark corner, is on the FCC language, an authorized representative of the United States is also classified as an importer. So it has a little bit more, I don't know, teeth or something like that in order to get the proper authority or a proper responsibility. Now, there's some funny stuff going up between the UK and Northern Ireland for a long time. They have a special relationship, obviously a troubled past, and a lot of sort of internecine issues and so forth. So what happened is, in order to sell into Northern Ireland, they don't take the UKCA mark. And so they came up with their own UK NI mark, which can be used in conjunction or in isolation with the CE marking. So the way I kind of think that this happened is that the Northern Ireland folks, and there was a hot debate over the border, whether they're going to have to go to a hard border or soft border, how are they going to, create the issue between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So I think what happened there, whatever interest said, hey, we don't want to accept the UKCA mark. We're gonna have our own, or we'll take the CE marking. So just a kind of a weird little wrinkle for the Northern Ireland market. So what are we doing? We're developing procedures to transition existing notified body type exam certificates to UKCA. We're informing our clients, or watching the regulations. We're being hopeful that it's going to transition well. We're doing a lot of internal work to make sure that we understand what the requirements are and that our team understands it so we can inform our clients. So in the end, most products can be self-declared. You may need a certificate from a UK notified body or under a MRA partner country. And again, my hat's off to NIST and the US government for getting the MRA going between US and UK early. So strategy for conformity assessment section, we need to inform our clients of this, make sure they're ready. I think it's going to be a soft landing with enough preparation. However, there may be some particular cases that would need some extra study. And happy to take some questions, answers, but I can't answer any questions about these two people.
How do you like the look of the mark?
It's fine. Yeah. Right here. Yeah.
Can you envision a scenario where somebody maybe outside of Northern Ireland would use the Northern Ireland mark versus just getting a CE mark?
Well, the CE marking is okay in Northern Ireland and obviously the EU, but it's not recognized in Great Britain, if that tracks your question.
So when would somebody use the Northern Ireland mark?
If they're, yeah, I don't know. They might as well just.
That's what I'm trying to say. The Northern Ireland mark's not going to be accepted in the rest of the UK, right?
No.
Yeah.
Dan, I think it was a kind of a political move saying, hey, we're not going to take your UK CA mark. We want our own. This is not unusual, around the world.
All right, so we shouldn't invest a lot of resources in getting recognized to apply a UK NI mark. Huh?
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
Mike. This is Ramona. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Ramona.
How are you, Mike?
I'm
I'll
well.
put my camera on for a minute. Hopefully it hasn't readjusted. There you go.
Very nice.
Hi, I like your hat. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was really informative because we always look at things from one way, and then when we hear it from the cabs, it's always, we learn so much more about the real practical application of everything. I think for the UK NI mark, it might be UK approved bodies that are approving a product just for Ireland. So it might be limited. We probably have to fact check that. It's like one of these things where we all check Google, but I think it might be limited to UK cabs that only want to do conformity assessment for a product that's going to go into Ireland because they can't use the CE marking. So
right.
it might be that limited usage, I think.
Yeah, it's a little weird. I puzzled over that for a while, and I did the best I could.
Yeah, no, I think it is. Can I make a few comments?
Please.
Just because it's such a good topic. Mike, earlier we had talked today about the whole transition to the new MRA, and one of the things that happened is on day one, the two schemes, they mirrored each other, the EU scheme and the UK scheme. And I talked earlier today also about some new things happening in Europe that I don't think will happen in the UK. So fairly quickly, these two schemes are going to diverge. Maybe not in great technical detail at first, but over time they will. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens. And my other comment is kudos to you for operating in a very gray area right now because the UK scheme isn't fully fledged out yet. So you're sort of having to stumble in the dark a little with, there's not a formal group for the approved bodies. There's not a lot of guidance. And it's been really weird for us to implement it because we designated all the notified bodies to the UK without a formal scheme in place. So we're trying to gather as many details as we can as quickly as we can for you. So.
Well, as we stumble through the dark, please hold our hand. We appreciate it.
We'll hold each other's hand because I'm not really sure on some of this stuff either. So
yeah.
I'm not comfortable usually operating at all in these gray areas. I want everything black and white, but this is just one of these things where here we are, we've got cabs recognized to do it, and this information is just not all there from the UK side. So I think what you said is perfect, which is sort of a soft unveiling and a soft unrolling of the program. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated your presentation.
Thank you, Ramona. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I react to demand, and when my customer service and salespeople say, Mike, what are you doing about this? We said, well, we're going to do something.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can fix it later or make it better later.
Yeah, I think they left us no choice with the way this all happened.
Yeah.
So appreciate that you're doing that for them.
It's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Keep telling myself that every day. We might be talking about different things though. Any other questions for Mike?
I do want to note, Ramona, a lot of this stuff was piloted by Peter, who was, you know, an obviously careful researcher. So I got to give him credit for a lot of the core information. And I'm gonna volunteer him to give this to a notified body group if it's of interest, like we've done in the past with Red and Mr. Darby.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think they'll appreciate it.
Very good. Any other questions for Mike?
Oh, you know, I will add one more thing, maybe because it might be of interest to the group. We're in a bit of a quandary because there are technically two separate schemes now, right? There's technically the European scheme and there's technically the UK scheme. But if a new CAB came to us today and they said, you know, we want to be approved we want to be recognized by the UK as an approved body just for the UK, we wouldn't do it because foundationally, in order to be able to do this stuff for the UK, you have to know what's happening in Europe, and you have to actually be plugged in to everything in Europe right now. So if a certification body came to us and said, you know, we want to be a notified body or an approved body just for the UK, we wouldn't do it. We don't have a mechanism or an application process for somebody new. We only transitioned the existing notified bodies to become UK approved bodies. So it's kind of a weird place to be. So all that has to be worked out with the accreditation bodies and also with the UK, and then we have to develop criteria for that. I don't know if we would ever allow it because the two are so plugged into one another, the systems.
Well, that's a tall fence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate you jumping in to offer to present this to the group. And yeah, it's fumbling in the dark or blazing new trails. It's great to see what you've done to pull this information together. We appreciate you sharing it with us and allowing us to partake of the benefits of your hard work.
My pleasure. Good to see you. At least a bunch of initials and a few faces.